The scent hit me like a physical blow. Laura's perfume. That expensive vanilla and sandalwood blend she'd started wearing 6 months ago. I was bent over the engine of a rusted Toyota in my Dayton garage when the memory crashed through 5 years of carefully constructed walls. For a moment, I wasn't Mark Ellis anymore. I was Ethan Caldwell, standing in my laundry room in Bloomington on a Thursday night that changed everything. Thursday, October 15th, 2020, laundry night. I had been methodical about everything in those days. Thursday was laundry. Saturday was groceries. Sunday was family dinner, though family had become increasingly loose. Laura worked marketing at the insurance company. Mason was 17, more interested in his phone than conversation. Lily was 15 and already showing signs of entitled attitude. I was sorting through the week's clothes when something crinkled in Laura's coat pocket. The receipt fell to the concrete floor like a confession. The Marriott, downtown Bloomington, room charge $189.00. Date, September 22nd, 2020. September 22nd. I remembered that date perfectly because I'd worked a double shift, sleeping in my truck between crews rather than drive home for 4 hours. Laura had texted around midnight. Working late on the Morrison account. Don't wait up. The receipt felt heavier than paper should. Room service charges, $67.50. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine. I stood there in that buzzing fluorescent light, holding proof of my wife's betrayal, and felt relief. Not the sharp pain I'd expected, but relief. For months, I'd been living with this gnawing sense that something was wrong, that I was slowly going crazy. The distance, the late meetings, how Laura flinched when I touched her unexpectedly. Now I knew I wasn't crazy. I was methodical, even then. I photographed the receipt from 3 angles, noted the timestamp, room number, itemized charges. Then I folded it carefully and placed it back exactly where I'd found it. Laura was already in bed when I came upstairs, lying on her side, facing away, her breathing too even to be natural sleep. I undressed quietly and slid between sheets that smelled like her new perfume and something else. Something masculine and expensive that wasn't me. "How was work?" she asked softly. "Fine," I said, because what else was there to say? She made a small sound that might have been relief. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night," I replied. But I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, thinking about 20 years of marriage and how it felt to discover that the person sleeping next to you had become a complete stranger. At 2 a.m., I gave up pretending. I dressed quietly and drove to the Marriott, parking across the street where I could see the lobby. Everything looked normal and mundane, just a hotel doing business in the early hours. But somewhere in that building, my wife had betrayed 20 years of marriage. I sat in my truck until dawn, watching that lobby, understanding with perfect clarity that my life as Ethan Caldwell was ending. The voice in my head kept trying to find innocent explanations, but my gut knew better. My gut had been screaming the truth for months, while my brain made excuses. I'd been suffocating under the weight of being not enough for so long that I'd almost convinced myself it was normal. Not exciting enough, not successful enough, not ambitious enough. Just Ethan Caldwell, shift worker and husband, trying to hold together a family that had already decided he didn't matter. The receipt changed everything, because it gave me permission to stop pretending. Over the following 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own life. I went through the motions of being a husband and father while systematically documenting the decay of everything I'd spent 20 years building. The methodical part of me, the part that troubleshot complex machinery at the plant, took over completely. Laura's second phone was the first breakthrough. I found it wedged between her car seat and center console while she was inside the grocery store. An iPhone with a pink case I'd never seen, password protected but warm from recent use. I didn't try to break into it. Instead, I memorized the number from the lock screen and photographed the device from every angle, noting exactly where I'd found it before sliding it back. When Laura returned with groceries, chattering about sales and expenses, I helped her load bags and said nothing about the secret phone 3 feet away. The credit card statements were easier. Laura handled our finances but had grown careless about hiding papers. 3 different restaurants I'd never been to, all expensive places downtown. Charges that corresponded perfectly with her working late nights. Always for 2 people. Appetizers, 2 entrees, wine, dessert. I photographed every statement, every suspicious charge, building a timeline clearer than any private investigator could have provided. My wife wasn't just cheating, she was living an entire double life, funded by our joint account while I picked up extra shifts to cover what I thought were legitimate business expenses. But I needed to know who. The answer came Wednesday evening, when I followed her from her office building. She'd texted about working late again, but instead of staying downtown, she drove to the kind of neighborhood where houses had circular driveways and 3-car garages. She pulled into the driveway of a Tudor-striped house with perfect landscaping. Instead of knocking like a visitor, she walked to a side entrance and used a key like she belonged there. Grant Whitaker. I recognized him now. Successful insurance executive, country club member, married to a woman who volunteered at the children's hospital. I'd seen his picture in the business journal, read about his promotion to regional manager. He was everything I wasn't. Expensive suits, manicured hands, smooth confidence that came from never worrying about overtime pay or electric bills. The kind of man who could afford $189, 0-cent hotel rooms and wine that cost more than my weekly groceries. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching warm light in the windows, knowing my wife was inside living a life I could never provide. When she finally emerged, hair mussed and lipstick gone, she looked younger than she had in years. Happier. More alive than I'd seen her since our early marriage. That should have been the worst part, seeing her happiness with another man. But it wasn't. The worst part came later, when I walked into our kitchen and saw Mason and Lily with brand new iPhones. Not the basic model we'd discussed for Lily's birthday, but premium versions, with all the upgrades. "Where did these come from?" I asked. Mason barely looked up from his device. "Mom's friend Grant got them for us, early birthday presents." The casual way he said it hit like a punch. Mom's friend Grant. Lily glanced up with mild teenage annoyance. "He's been helping out while you're always working. He actually cares about what we want." The words were delivered with such offhand cruelty that I couldn't speak. My children were talking about my wife's lover like he was a family friend who deserved their gratitude more than I did. "How long have you known him?" I managed. Mason shrugged. "Few months. He takes us to nice restaurants sometimes. Better than the chain places you pick. He's really successful," Lily added, scrolling through apps. "He knows about technology and investment, important things." The implication hung in the air. "Unlike you, Dad. Unlike your shift work and used truck. And careful budgeting for things we couldn't really afford." They weren't innocent victims of their mother's affair. They were willing participants who had chosen comfort over loyalty, expensive gifts over integrity. They knew exactly what was happening and decided Grant Whitaker's money was worth more than their father's love. That night, I sat alone in our living room after everyone had gone to bed, surrounded by the life I'd worked 20 years to build, understanding it had been built on sand. The house payments I'd never missed, the college funds I'd contributed to religiously, the family dinners and birthday parties, none of it mattered to the people I'd done it for. Laura came downstairs around midnight, standing in the doorway in her robe, looking concerned in that practiced way that now seemed completely false. "Are you okay, honey? You seem stressed lately," she asked. I looked at her and saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. "I'm fine, just thinking." She sat on my chair's arm, putting her hand on my shoulder in a gesture that once would have comforted me. Now it felt like performance. "Maybe you should take time off. You've been working such long hours. The kids and I barely see you anymore." The kids and I. Like we were separate entities, like I was the outsider who needed to work harder to earn a place in my own family. "Maybe I should," I agreed, because I'd already started planning something she couldn't imagine. But I wasn't planning to confront them. Confrontation would only give them a chance to lie better, to gaslight me into believing I was imagining things. I was planning something much more permanent, much more final. I was planning to disappear. The week I spent planning my disappearance was the most focused I'd ever been. Every decision was deliberate, calculated to cause maximum long-term impact with minimal immediate drama. While Laura continued her affair and my children enjoyed their new phones, I systematically dismantled the financial foundation they'd taken for granted. The joint savings account was first. $23,000, accumulated over years of overtime and careful budgeting. Money saved for Mason's college, for Lily's wedding, for the Colorado vacation we'd never taken. I withdrew it all over 3 days, using different branches, converting most to cashier's checks made out to Mark Ellis, an identity I'd been building with help from the internet and a birth certificate belonging to a man who'd died young in Pennsylvania. My tools came next. Thousands of dollars worth of professional equipment accumulated over years. I sold everything to a dealer in Indianapolis, driving 3 hours each way to avoid questions. The buyer asked nothing about why I needed cash, just counted out $6,700 and helped me load his truck. The wedding ring I'd worn for 20 years came off easier than expected. I sold it to a pawn shop in another town, along with my watch and the gold chain my parents had given me for graduation. Through it all, I maintained perfect normalcy at home. I kissed Laura goodbye each morning, helped Lily with homework, asked Mason about college applications. They were so absorbed in their new reality that they never saw the systematic destruction happening in front of them. The confrontation came Saturday morning. Laura was making pancakes, humming that song she'd been playing since the affair started. Mason was texting. Lily was complaining about school drama. I placed the manila folder on the counter next to the syrup bottle. "What's this?" Laura asked, spatula frozen mid-flip. "Open it," I replied. Her face went white. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, screenshots of restaurant charges, photos of her using Grant's key, bank records showing exactly how much of our money she'd spent on her affair. "Even I can explain," she stammered. "Don't," I replied. Laura's hands shook as she flipped through the evidence. "This isn't what you think. Grant is just a friend." She hesitated. "Room 314 at the Marriott? September 22nd, October 3rd, October 17th. I recited dates from memory. Chez Laurent, October 8th. Magnolia Bistro, October 15th. Should I continue? The spatula clattered the floor. "You've been spying on me." "I've been paying attention," I shot back. That's when Mason and Lily walked in, seeing the papers spread across the counter, seeing their mother's tears, seeing me standing like a judge, delivering verdict. Instead of shock or horror, I saw irritation, annoyance that their secret was out. "We knew you'd react like this," Mason said with teenage exhaustion, all crazy and possessive. "Grant's a good guy, Dad. He treats Mom better than you do." The words came out so casually, with such certainty, that I felt something break inside my chest. Lily nodded in agreement. "He actually listens when she talks, and he takes us places without making a big deal about money all the time." There it was, the truth laid bare by my own children. I wasn't a betrayed husband. I was an inconvenience, a source of financial stability who couldn't compete with Grant's generous affections. "I'm leaving," I said. Laura's face crumpled. "Ethan, please. We can work through this. I'll never see him again." But her promises meant nothing. Even if sincere, the damage was complete. She'd made her choice months ago, and my children had made theirs when they decided Grant's gifts were worth more than their father's love. I packed one duffel bag, 20 years of life reduced to clothes and necessities. I left my wedding ring on the dresser next to Laura's jewelry box. The last thing I heard was Lily asking Laura, "Does this mean we have to give back the phones?" I drove toward Dayton in my old pickup, feeling lighter with every mile. The radio played classic rock, songs from when I'd believed in forever and family and the reward of doing right. But I didn't feel angry, I didn't feel sad, I felt free. Mark Ellis was born on that highway, somewhere between Bloomington and Dayton, in a pickup that smelled like motor oil and possibility. Ethan Caldwell died quietly, without ceremony, in a kitchen full of people who'd already forgotten he was supposed to matter. 5 years passed like seasons changing, gradual, inevitable, surprisingly peaceful. Mark Ellis built a life in Dayton with methodical patience. I rented the apartment above Rosie's Diner on Oak Street, took a job at Murphy's Auto Repair, and settled into a routine that never varied. Murphy was a 60-year-old Irishman who asked no questions about my past and cared only that I could diagnose engine problems by sound. The other mechanics accepted me as easily as they'd accepted new equipment. I became known for impossible cases, cars other shops couldn't diagnose, vintage engines requiring intuition more than computers. My apartment was sparse but comfortable. A bed, kitchen table, television I rarely watched. Books filled empty spaces. Technical manuals and biographies of men who'd built empires from nothing. I adopted Rex from the county shelter, a German Shepherd mix abandoned by previous owners. We understood each other perfectly. The ghost years taught me something I'd never learned as Ethan Caldwell. Contentment wasn't about having everything you wanted. It was about wanting only what you could provide for yourself. On a gray October morning in 2025, 5 years almost to the day since I'd driven away from Bloomington, Lily walked into Murphy's garage. I was diagnosing a misfire in a 1987 Mustang when I heard footsteps. Something about the cadence made me look up, and there she was, 20 years old now, thin and hollow-eyed in a way that spoke of years carrying weight too heavy for her shoulders. She'd grown up to look like her mother, but where Laura had always carried confidence, Lily seemed diminished. Secondhand clothes, but clean, hair longer than I remembered, face marked by premature seriousness that comes from learning hard lessons young. "Hello, Dad." The word hung between us like smoke. I straightened slowly, wiping hands on a rag. "Lily." She shifted nervously, clutching a purse against her chest. "You're hard to find. Mark Ellis, Dayton, Ohio. Took me 2 years and a private investigator." "You hired a private investigator?" I asked. "I saved for 18 months, worked 2 jobs." She looked around the garage. "You look different, older." "5 years will do that," I replied. "You look happy," she said, sounding surprised. I studied her face, looking for traces of the entitled teenager who'd casually destroyed her family for an iPhone. I found someone else entirely, someone who'd learned what consequences felt like. "Where are you here, Lily?" I asked. The question deflated her. She looked down, gathering courage. "I need to tell you what happened after you left. We walked to Rosie's Diner, where coffee was strong and booths high enough for private conversations. Rosie brought us mugs and pie without being asked." Lily wrapped her hands around her mug like stealing its warmth. "Mom filed for divorce 6 months after you left, claimed abandonment, told everyone you were unstable, that you'd run from responsibilities." The words felt like weather reports from a distant climate. Someone else's pain in someone else's life. "Grant's wife found out about the affair 2 months after you disappeared," Lily continued. "Patricia found hotel receipts in his car. She went completely insane, came to our house screaming, calling Mom names, threatening to destroy her reputation." I sipped coffee and waited. But that wasn't the worst part. Patricia waited for Grant in his driveway one evening. When he came home, she shot him. The words hit like cold water. She killed him? 3 times in the chest, then called 911 and waited for police. Lily's hands shook. The whole thing was in newspapers. Local executive murdered by jealous wife. Mom's name was in every article as the other woman. Grant Whitaker, the successful executive who'd bought my children's loyalty with expensive gifts, was dead. Murdered by his wife in a crime that had probably destroyed multiple families. Mom lost her job 3 weeks later. The company said downsizing, but everyone knew it was the scandal. No one in Bloomington would hire her. She tried Indianapolis, but the story had spread. The systematic destruction was becoming clear. Laura's comfortable double life hadn't just ended. It had exploded spectacularly. Mason left for college and never came home. Even on breaks. He blamed Mom for everything, said she'd embarrassed the family beyond repair. He won't take her calls. "And you?" I asked. Lily's laugh was bitter. "I stayed. Somebody had to. We lost the house, couldn't make payments without your income. She's working as a waitress now, making barely enough for rent on a 1-bedroom apartment." This young woman bore no resemblance to the spoiled teenager who defended Grant Whitaker. She'd been forced to grow up quickly, to face consequences her 15-year-old self never could have imagined. She cries every night, keeps your old photos on her nightstand, and never took off her wedding ring. She talks about you like you might come back someday. Something twisted in my chest. Not quite sympathy, but not indifference either. She knows she destroyed everything. But knowing doesn't fix anything. It just makes the nights longer. We sat in silence, listening to the diner's background noise. Grill sizzling, customers talking, life continuing around our small island of reckoning. "I'm sorry," Lily finally said, "for what I said in the kitchen, for choosing his gifts over your love, for not seeing what we were doing." The apology was genuine but also desperate, less about my forgiveness and more about her need for absolution. "We were kids," she added. "You were 17 and 15, I said gently. "Old enough to understand loyalty, old enough to know actions have consequences." Her face crumpled. "I know. I've had 5 years to think about it. That man who bought us phones, we never really knew him. He was a stranger who died violently and left nothing but scandal, and we chose him over you." The pain in her voice was real, but so was the calculation. Lily had come not just to apologize, but to see if anything could be salvaged. "Is that why you're here, to apologize?" She looked up with eyes older than 20 should be. "I'm here because I love you, and because I've spent 5 years learning to live with what we did. Because Mom is broken and Mason won't talk to any of us, and I don't know how to fix anything." There it was. Not just guilt, but hope. Hope that I might restore the stability they'd thrown away. "I forgave you long ago," I said. "All of you. Carrying anger was like carrying hot coals. It only burned me." Relief flooded her face. "So you'll come back? You'll come home?" The question hung like a bridge I had no intention of crossing. "Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, Lily. I forgave you so I could move on, not so you could feel better." Her face fell. "But we're family." "No. We were family." Past tense. Family requires loyalty, trust, mutual respect. What we had was people sharing a house who decided a stranger's money was worth more than a father's love. The words were delivered without anger, just cold finality. Lily began to cry. Not manipulative tears, but genuine grief of someone who'd finally understood that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. I paid for coffee and walked her to the bus station. She hugged me goodbye, and I let her, because she needed that connection, even if it meant nothing to me. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. "I know," I said. "I loved you too." Her past tense. The most honest words I'd spoken in 5 years. 6 months after Lily's visit, Mark Ellis had settled deeper into his new identity. I'd bought a small house on the outskirts of Dayton, adopted a dog from the local shelter, and begun dating a divorced teacher named Carol who asked no questions about my past. Laura's cafe had closed and she'd moved to another state to escape the judgment of Bloomington. Mason graduated college but hadn't spoken to his mother in 2 years. Lily worked at a nonprofit, trying to rebuild her life while carrying the weight of my rejection. I sometimes thought about my old life, but it felt like remembering a movie I'd once watched, rather than something I'd lived. I wasn't the same man who'd once desperately wanted to be enough for people who never valued what I offered. Mark Ellis was harder, more self-contained, but also more authentic. I'd finally become the man I needed to be, instead of the man others demanded. Carol and I had developed something real, not the desperate codependence I'd mistaken for love in my first marriage, but mutual respect between two people who'd learned to be complete on their own. We talked about small things, her students, my repair jobs, the weather. It was peaceful in a way I'd never experienced during 20 years of walking on eggshells. "You're different from other divorced men," she told me one evening as we sat on my back porch. "Most are either bitter about their ex-wives or still carrying torches. You seem resolved." I made peace with letting go, I said, and it was true. The private investigator's report had arrived 3 weeks earlier, Lily's doing, apparently, wanting to check on me from a distance. It contained the basic facts of Mark Ellis's life. Employed mechanic, homeowner, dog owner, relationship with local teacher. No criminal record, no debts, no complications. A perfectly ordinary existence, which was exactly what I'd wanted. Rex was aging but still enthusiastic about our morning walks. At 7 years old, he'd learned to trust that I wouldn't abandon him the way his previous owners had. We understood each other completely. Two creatures who'd been discarded and found better lives because of it. Murphy had started hinting about retirement, suggesting the right person might take over the garage. The idea appealed to me, not because I needed to build something impressive, but because I'd found work that satisfied me and customers who appreciated competent service without drama. On quiet evenings, I reflected on the mathematics of revenge. Most people imagined it required elaborate schemes, dramatic confrontations, complex plans designed to inflict maximum suffering. But the most effective revenge was much simpler. Building a better life and refusing to let the people who'd hurt you participate in it. The Ethan Caldwell who'd discovered that hotel receipt had been desperate for validation from people who'd already decided he wasn't worth their full attention. He'd measured his success by their happiness, his identity by their approval, his worth by their satisfaction. Mark Ellis had learned to measure his worth by his own standards. He'd discovered that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And indifference, it turned out, was the most powerful weapon of all. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd look at myself in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back was older, marked by years of honest work and simple living, but the eyes were clearer than they'd been in decades, free from the desperate need to be enough for people who decided I wasn't. Mark Ellis, I'd say quietly, testing the name, that had become more real than the one I'd been born with. The man in the mirror would nod back, satisfied with the trade he'd made, surrendering a family that had never really valued him in exchange for a life built on his own terms, free from the exhausting work of trying to earn love from people who'd proven themselves incapable of giving it. The story ended with me working in my garage, content in my solitude, understanding that the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let people who betrayed you have any place in the life you build afterward. The final image was of me looking at myself in my bathroom mirror, seeing Mark Ellis instead of Ethan Caldwell, and feeling genuinely at peace with the trade. It was the best deal I'd ever made. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.